Okay, we should be good to go. Hello everybody, welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua in front of me. For those of you that are new to the channel, I like to do a little bit of prep at the beginning of the videos, mainly since I'm going to be live streaming this. I live stream it and then usually I go around and I either save the video and upload it to either YouTube or Patreon. Speaking of which, down below I have a whole bunch of links for the YouTube, Patreon, Twitch, etc., Etsy, and whatnot. So, in front of me, I don't know if I started off, so we have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I'm saturating the paper. Let's see how everything is looking on the screen. I have a Kindle right off to the side that lets me see everything and see if anybody's chatting. And if you want to skip ahead until the painting starts, feel free. That usually takes probably start about 2 minutes. I just like to talk a little bit about the palette, maybe set some stuff up, and give people time to come in and say hi. And for some reason lately, my video has been flipping on me, and I feel like everything has just been going wrong with streams lately. In fact, yesterday, I finally got, did it flip again? Yeah. I am so sorry for that. Anywho, where was I? Yesterday, I was finally getting my flow back, and I was mid-painting stream, and then the power went out. So it messed up the Wi-Fi, so it messed up the broadcast. Also, it was too dark in here to paint. I was going to get a flashlight and actually start painting by flashlight. And I paint wet and wet. That's why it was just so kind of just devastating when you're in the middle of the flow of things and then that happens. So today's painting, I usually go I kind of stream of conscious, just let things happen. And like I said, we paint wet and wet, and we'll see where we go with things. I use these clips on the end. This is just, I think it's just the MDF board. Is that what it's called? Cut to 11 by 15. Might be a little bit bigger than that. And I just clip onto it. Let's see. How do we want to start this one off? Let's get our brush wet. So I like using the medium hake brush. It's kind of the one that I settled on that works for me. I use the Ranson hake brush, which is pre-worn and pointed, and allows me not to just lay down large washes. It also lets me do different textured effects. So Alizarin Crimson. I'm going to have water through here. It's going to be very similar to a previous painting that we've done. It's just a subject that I want to paint again. We're going to grab some raw sienna. And every so often I'll be talking to somebody, and it'll be somebody in the live chat. We have Phil, who came into the live chat. How you doing? So this is raw sienna. I'm not sure if you're here for the stream yesterday, where it was thundering and lightning out, and then my power went out midstream, and it messed up everything that I had going. And since I paint wet and wet, it kind of just destroyed things. Well, it's good to hear that you're doing good. Okay, so far that's alizarin and raw sienna. We could put a touch of blue here in the sky. I've been playing around with the Prussian blue lately. The Prussian blue, with me playing with it, has kind of, I think, stemmed from an artist is it Eric Coppell? He is a oil painter, I believe. I don't know if he's paints anything besides that. He's very well versed in the Hudson River Valley movement and landscape painting, and has like professional videos out in regards to it. And I watched him gradiate a sky up from Prussian blue to a ultramarine. The washes were really light, and they were in, I don't know if you'd call it a wash or a glaze for the oil. They're in oil, and they're very beautiful. And so Prussian blue has just been on my mind a little bit lately. My friend who's an oil painter was like, yeah, I got Prussian blue because of that video, the one that I was talking about moments ago. Prussian blue, traditionally, and I don't think it has this issue anymore, but it had a weird aspect to it, where I believe if you took a painting that had Prussian blue in it, and you put it in an area that was, let's say, dark, the blue itself would darken. And then if you were to move that painting that has dried paint on it with the Prussian blue to a lighter area or into light, it would eventually lighten up, and it would go back and forth between those two things. What caused that phenomenon to happen, I'm not sure, but from what I understand, a lot of Prussian blue today is stable and doesn't have those issues. This is Payne's Gray that I'm going to put in. I'm also going to put a little land edge, probably right about here. And I'm just a huge fan of just putting that Payne's Gray along those edges. See that in a bit. Lately, instead of taking my go-to Venetian red or light red oxide to mix with ultramarine to give me a distant purple, kind of a aerial perspective effect, I've been taking the raw sienna and mixing it with ultramarine for a kind of toned down raw sienna. Not really sure the best way to describe how this color looks. Like a dirty green, a grayish green. But I find that it does work pretty well for aerial perspective to push things in the background. So I've been playing around with that. Compositionally, the one that I had done 2 days ago and then went to again yesterday was a receding landmass. And I'm going to utilize the fact that we're working wet and wet, and it's going to lighten up for me, and it's going to soften up. We're going to have a receding landmass, we're going to have another landmass in front, and it's going to create an S-shaped curve in the water here. So simple composition that you could find over and over again. I'm going to bring these up higher, and I'm going to play around with structures within it and bring the shadows down below. Foreground, I can use that same color for a landmass here. But what I like to do, and I'm going to take burnt umber right here, is take darker tones. I could take burnt umber, I could take burnt sienna, I could mix those with my Payne's Gray, ultramarine, any of those type of combinations. Here's just burnt umber and Payne's Gray, and darken that foreground. I've talked about my foreground approach quite a bit, where if you look on my YouTube, I have quite a few videos. A lot of them are time-lapse for this particular subject, but there are some where I actually did the full-length videos of pen and ink studies, sketches of master paintings from the 1800s. And I felt, and I don't know if this is a reoccurring theme or if it was essentially just me being drawn to those topics, but that the foreground had a lot of variation in it with texture, but tonally there really wasn't too much difference. And I think that stems from the fact that we often want to, we're often told not to spend too much, not to put too much in the foreground. And I think the masters from the 1800s put a lot in the foreground. However, not having that tonal variation helped prevent the eye from resting there. I hope that makes sense. So once I get things in place with this wet and wet technique, I kind of have two approaches, or I have a few different approaches. One thing I could do is dry it off completely, and then I would have the softness from this, and then I can put dry brush and foreground effects, and we'd have a I guess you'd use the word dichotomy between the two, and that's an interesting effect. The second one is to build up pigments, so using a stronger concentration of pigment and continuing to paint wet and wet and building up tonal values and shapes. Here, having that recession, that lighter value, and then me creating in front of it a foliage for a darker foreground tree, something along these lines, to create depth. Being that I'm still wet and wet, I'm still going to have a softness take place, and I'll still be able to benefit from stark contrast of sharp edges later on. And being wet and wet, I like to put the shadows in wet and wet. It just really seems to always work so well for me. So we see how this one comes out in front, this landmass. We have a little path here. We have a grouping. We have the shadows. We have this receding mass. I didn't talk too much about this that I started putting here, but I'll go into that in a bit. I grab a more bluer, receding grayish. And you can add variation for this receding one as well. You have that receding, and then we can have a closer mass and its reflection. And we could even Payne's gray, burnt umber, just trying to darken it up, or even burnt sienna in there. Put another grouping here to give us the idea: close, further, farthest. I'm increasing the darker values, or just the concentration of pigment. I'm manipulating the size of the object to make it seem like it's closer, just utilizing different perspective tools. But if you're just going to get larger, have variation in it. Don't just have bump, bump, bump. Okay? Now, in this wet and wet stage, at this distance, there's a lot of fun things that you can do. Here I have a #1 rigger. With it, you could either soak and have a lot of water on it, but if you do that, you're going to get, like right here, it's starting to take place. You'll get I can't think of the word, the cauliflower effect, so you want to watch out for that. So you want to increase your pigment. You're still going to get a softening, and that's going to help this recede from whatever we put in front of this. So it's just helping us build layers up and up and up. I I was playing around yesterday before the power went out where I had a few like different tree structures back in here, just to add a little bit of variety. You can also use the rigger for some darker areas, etc. Now, I'm down in Louisiana where we have the power structure is like really good in the town that I'm in, the infrastructure, and we're kind of like not a big city or anything like that, but last summer, which was actually about a year ago to I think last week or so, we had Hurricane Barry pass through. I think it was Hurricane Barry. It wound up just being a Cat 1, and I think it didn't really have a very centralized eye. It may have just passed to the east of us, but regardless, like the power kept on going on and in and out, and the Facebook page for the city was very responsive, saying, hey, power out in this area, down tree, crews are on it, or power out here, or aware of a down power line in this location, crews are on it. They were very responsible, very on the ball. And it was good, you know, it was a little, you know, nerve-wracking. So we have really big oak trees right around the house, and watching those and listening to those oak trees move was pretty crazy. It was just me here at the time, so I went and hung out with my neighbors and we played board games during it, and me and my neighbor, we had stepped outside and we heard a crack, and I had said, oh, you know, you heard that? Sounds like a tree. And he said, no, that was lightning. And then the next day it was the tree right across the street, big cypress tree. One of the limbs broke and fell on the house across the street. But there's more cosmetic damage to the roof than anything else, fortunately. And the guy inside was okay. Old man Bill. Okay, so I'm just taking this dark, putting in the foreground. In the video, unfortunately, the foreground isn't showing up the best. You're not really missing much. Here's the edge of the paper. I'm trying to show you in the bottom left on that clip, right around there. With all the issues that I've been having with the video, I'm not going to adjust it on this one for right now. I'm sorry. Okay, we have somebody else in the live chat. Zara, how y'all doing today? And welcome. I'm going to take raw sienna, so I'm still working wet and wet. And one thing I like to do, if we're wet and wet, is to kind of map out a foreground tree. And if you heard that, I think that is Hammy crying. Hammy's one of the cats. So I'm mapping out this foreground tree, and with this, if you're using a hake brush and you're creating that foreground effect, this area is all wet right here. So I can take, and this is like up to you on how you want to utilize it. Let's say I take burnt sienna. If I was to put this pattern in and stipple it in, it's going to go technically wet and wet, and it's going to diffuse into those areas. You could also take Payne's Gray and do that same thing. But what you want to keep in mind, if we have the light coming from the background, we are going to have light catching those edges, and then we're going to have a density towards the middle of the tree. So have an interesting glow on the edge with a raw sienna, and then utilize darker values on the inside. Now, I'm moving kind of fast here, just kind of all over the place. The corners of the painting, I like to darken those. That's going to prevent the eye from going off the page. If you look at a lot of painters from the 1800s, it's just very, very common. In fact, I was watching an oil painting video on glazing techniques, and the guy was absolutely fantastic, and you could tell that his passion was painting, that he just loved it. And this is some ultramarine blue in there. Let's build that up. He had a dried oil painting, and he passed a dark ultramarine all over the whole thing and started wiping back. So he used it, oil painting glazing, which we're not doing here, we're doing watercolor. He used it as kind of a discovery technique. But the reason I'm mentioning that, why is the reason I mentioned that? Oh, he actually had a term for the darkening on the sides and the bottom corner, which I need to go back and watch, because he had said it so casually as if it was something that everybody knew. So now here, I really don't distinguish with my darks. I'm just building up textures and structures. You can see where the paper itself has naturally dried, and we're probably only 25, 30 minutes into this painting. I didn't time it, but you'll get to a point where the paper starts naturally drying and you start learning about what happens at that stage, and you want to use that to your advantage. If you like to scrape, if you take the edge of a card, either a hotel room key card, a card you got in the mail that doesn't work, it just has like your name on it and they want you to sign up or something like that, you can cut that up and use it to do a textural effects with watercolor. I'm using the side of the rigger here to also lay down texture. That's a technique I really like. Anyway, scraping effects, you really want to pay attention to the quantity of water in the area. If we were to start right in the beginning when I had the paper completely soaked, and I'll look for an area that's wet to try to demonstrate, we'll look down here. If I use a sharp edge, we get some line, and we do potentially get what I just call a backfill, where if the line's not that long and we have a lot of water around it, it's going to creep back in and fill it back up, and it's going to be kind of like a damaged line in it, which might be an effect that you want. Here, and I'm reluctant to put the stroke here because it's so close to the center, and I really don't want that to be a point of interest. Let's find another spot to demonstrate this. Rounded edge, when it's saturated, if I dig in, it helps push that pigment out, and you could even see some areas where it was trying to resist and fill back up. So pay attention to the water in the area. If you have an area where you can't scrape, for example, really not much scrape going on here, you can lay pigment down and then scrape that. Also, the direction of the scrape, go sideways, and if you play around with it, and here I'm just going fast and loose, but if you play around with it, you can give yourself the idea of different types of trees, different types of bark, different textures. Continuing along the lines of scraping, it's very easy to use scraping for plant structure. Little branch coming up. You could even use it to do the reflection for it. Bigger swipes. You can use it to do just a simple rock structure if you want that fast and loose effect. Even dead trees, if I took this and went the whole way with it, I could give myself the illusion of a dead tree. And depending on how far you want to take it, you can then, for example, I'm just grabbing Payne's Gray and darkening that underside to do that cast shadow. It's a little bit off camera, and I apologize for that. Thinner strokes. If you really want to play around with a tree branches and whatnot, it's very easy to do. Lift up, put down, you'll get a weaving effect. But anybody that scrapes, YouTube artists, Joe Menza, who uses the hake brush, Stephen Cronin, who uses the hake brush, Lois Davison, sorry. Who else? David Usher, I think he uses the hake. I haven't watched him in a while, but he's been doing a lot of, I think, oils and acrylics lately. They'll do scrapes, and they'll warn as well. It's very easy to go overboard with it. Some areas are wet, some areas are dry here. With textural effects at this point, you can use that to your advantage. You can put areas like that where it'll stay loose, other areas where it'll go wet and blend in. Brought the shadow down. I think I like horizontal strokes for water surface, so I'm just going to bring that across. I mentioned Eric Kopel, an oil painter, earlier in the video, and what little I had watched of him, he had a very good point with water. If you were going to draw water and he was like mapping out his oil painting, you could come towards you, but since water's a flat plane, it's better to do kind of hash marks, horizontal lines to draw it to help retain that structure, that flat plane that recedes. I actually used that idea on an oil painting for a plate that I've been working on, just like a silver plate, and it kind of helped me get that illusion of that flat plate structure. But I'm still working on oil paintings and still lives. Once again, we haven't done any dry off whatsoever. We've been starting from extreme saturated paper, Stonehenge Aqua, 100% cotton, which for me handles wet and wet very well. Let's darken this up back here. Now, I'm just wetting this. I'm going to do kind of more of a wash right here so that it'll be more blended and soft to recede back. I should probably mix a little bit of ultramarine in there to cool it down to help it recede. So it's less it's not as vivid, I guess would be the word. Now, I'm just kind of playing around with edges right here. A prime place to really play with a stark contrast is if you're dry at this point, you could take a very dark pigment and put a branch structure right there if you wanted. Even up in here is an opportunity for a point of interest if you want to play with that. You know, see what works for you. And if you get, I think the word's deft enough, agile enough, if you're dexterous enough, you can play around, and I don't have that skill yet, but you can lay down light foliage with the same brush that you use to put copious amounts of water down. So ultimately, I think a lot of the fast and loose watercolor painting will depend on what type of large brush you like to use. Some people use the large round brushes. You probably get a brush that big in comparison and play around with that. Painters that are alive right now, Alan Owen is very good at using the larger brushes that are round. So if you like fast and loose, but you have those type of brushes, that's what you want to look into. Look up Alan Owen. He's very good. He paints, I guess, I don't know if you'd say in the style of Edward Wesson, or at least he has a lot of tribute videos to Alan Wesson. No, Edward Wesson. Sorry to just throw random names out there, you know. But chances are, if you found this, you might know all those other people. That might be for when I load this up on YouTube. By the way, if you made it this far in a video, and it's either on Twitch or YouTube or Patreon, you're welcome to follow along and paint with these. And I would love to see your results. There's some fantastic people on Instagram that have tagged me in the results of what they had painted. And by the way, if you ever paint somebody something from one of these videos and somebody says, "Hey, I love that, I'd love to buy it," you have my permission to go ahead and sell that painting, even if you copied it from me or something like that. I want you guys to prosper, and you know, art materials are expensive, so if you have that opportunity, you know, take it. You know, then you can turn around, get more paper, get more paint. I spent about $70 today picking up stuff to. My friend helped me build wet panel carriers, because if we're all good with like COVID down here in November, there's a festival called the Amma Festival, which last year I set up at, and I demoed oil painting, and I want to be able to do that again, but traveling with the wet panels was just like really rough. So my friend helped me build something for that today, so that was really cool. But between that $70, we built 2 of those, and we built kind of an upright magazine shelf for me to put my watercolor papers. I have a lot of paper around. So, like I said, we didn't do any dry off whatsoever. We just let things happen naturally. We're probably, I would say at this point, 40 or so minutes into the painting video. I put the structure here. I can give a little bit of an idea that something's coming out in this corner. We could play around on this side. I could even put foliage in front to help it recede. I could play around with the rigor and build up the density of this. And at any point you could say, all right, I'm done. Because here we have the S-shaped composition, and then I'm kind of pushing myself into bringing those sides in. We have Beaver in the live chat. How you doing, man? Last night when I was live streaming, halfway through it, we had a thunderstorm and power went out. So, with the #1 rigger, you could just really go in and create that overgrowth. I'm going to mix that. You know what I haven't really done? I used Prussian blue in the sky, but let me get some Prussian blue on the palette. I feel like it kind of acts like a phthalo, because if I mix it with a burnt umber, I get a greenish. It doesn't show up well on the camera, but I feel like I've seen this green before in my phthalo mixtures. But I'm going to utilize it as just a dark paint. Here I'm just taking the #1 rigger and just going on the side all willy-nilly, essentially just dry brushing with it. It's very easy to go overboard with it, so just watch out, but I do want more contrast in this mid-ground. So when I painted this one 2 or 3 days ago, it had a very soft background, and I would say almost a soft mid-ground. So let's see. Let me do a dry off. If you have earbuds on or anything like that, just watch out, because it gets loud. We'll do a dry off, we'll see how it looks, and we'll probably just leave it at this. It's not a complete dry off because there's a few spots that are jumping out of me, and I don't want to waste the time. Well, thank you, Beaver. I appreciate that. I hope it has some semblance of reality in it. It's just an imaginary scene, though. That's too much in the middle of the paper. Don't be afraid to move things around and whatnot. The water looks good. Thank you. For me, with the painting the water, I have to paint the water at the beginning of the painting when everything's super soaked. That gives me that soft effect, and then I just try to do a little bit of dry brush over it just to kind of catch the top of the surface of the that. Where's the alien spacecraft? We're not going to put an alien spacecraft in, but tell you what, I'll grab a little bit of Payne's Gray for you, and we'll put some birds. How does that sound? Okay. We do another dry off, so watch your ears. blow dryer is rough on the ears. I wish there was a better way to dry off the painting. Let's add a little bit of buckling take place, but let me see if I have a mat I can put on top of it, see how it looks. And I do. All right, so here is the mat, so we can kind of get an idea. And I'll lift up the camera and I'll put it over it so y'all can see what it looks like. So there's the results. I hope you enjoyed. You know, of course, you know, please like, subscribe, follow. If you have any questions, comments, you know, please let me know and I'll try to address them. If there's any topics you want me to work on, let me know. How many mats do I buy daily? I have this mat that I just use whenever I'm doing the videos, just for us to see what it looks like. But I ordered some mats the other day, and I ordered a pack of 25 front and back mats. And it's kind of a long-term investment, because if I mat something, it's kind of more prone to somebody buying it. Or if somebody says they like something, I'll mat it for free for them. But I dropped like $90 the other day on mats. I dropped $70 today on stuff just to build white canvas panels. That stuff adds up. It's expensive. And being a school teacher, you know, but it's a fun hobby. I'm not complaining. Anywho, on that note, I'll leave you guys with a joke. How about that? And the joke is this. I don't know if that's a terrible setup for a joke, but here's the joke. Why do chicken coops have 2 doors? Because if they had 4 doors, they'd be a chicken sedan. Get it? Coop and a sedan. Ha. Well, anywho, hope you all enjoyed. And I'm going to turn off the stream, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.